You know, it's almost inevitable that it would come to this. C. Ford wants a follow-up about mass drawing after the contour drawing video. And it's funny, uh, the use of words. I'm going to start this out by talking about, outline, contour, and silhouette, as you asked in the last part of your question, C. Ford. But I'm not going to talk about this last fine point, and that is Degas' statement and the degrees to which certain artists employ less or more contours along with what results happen because of that. I've talked about that before in other videos, and I can't tell you exactly which ones, unfortunately. But I've never addressed it in isolation, so I'll be happy to do that. But for today, we're just going to talk about mass drawing, the various things about mass drawing, okay? So let's just go to let's read the question. Where are the true mass drawings, if such exist, side by side with the Sargent or the Holbein? Is it merely what Sargent has done in the example, where the contour is lost or broken because he was unable to memorize any further? You seem to acknowledge the necessity for contour with the caveat that it should not be done in totality or so thoroughly. And I did respond to that point in this thing in the bottom of under the video online, which you'll have to go look for. What number was it? In the 240s somewhere. Perhaps you can also clarify sometime the difference between silhouettes, outline, and contour. And I will do that today, but I won't be doing the rest of what this statement asked was. But anyway, in any case, in the context of Degas' statement. So let's do that. For you, C. Ford, thank you for the question, the discussion point. And let's just go to some images. Remember, we started talking about line drawing, contour drawing, rather. And now, contour is the outline from your point of view. By the way, let me say something else. Contour is just the ride along my hand or finger, it's just that, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you, the viewer. But as an artist, it becomes synonymous with a silhouette or a tracing of the two-dimensional pattern, right? And this is what some people call the form of the hand. So instead of talking about form as modeling, Gemmell uses that expression. A lot of other people do. They say form, and they actually mean that shape delivered by what would be the contour drawing or the outline, okay? So contour is the real thing, right? You understand the contour is what really exists, but for a painter, it's what exists, just that one that exists from this one point of view at this one moment when the hand isn't moving. You can see if I turn my hand, the entire contour will be a different, you'll be looking at a different contour of my hand. But the contour is the real thing, right? The outline of that, we call the outline, right? We traced the tracing of that, we call the outline, right? And if you fill the outline in, and that's what you're looking at in this Paxton, you're looking at the outline. I better get my laser beam out here. Did I lose it? Must have already had it. All right, there we go. But you're looking at the outline. This is the contour. This is the line traced around, as it were, the contour, right? So the person sat there, the model sat there, this shape was fixed pretty well, right? It's always a thing with painters to try to get a single view where there's not a muscle moving, so to speak. It's quite a feat, right, when you can get it to hang together. When the model does move constantly, so to speak, even a good model. So anyway, but that's the traced contour with a single line. And we were trying to make that as students as thin as we could, knowing that there really is no line there. It's just a joint where two values meet. Remember, this outline actually also represents, the value of it theoretically might represent the value of the dark around it so that it can actually suggest a light effect. But that's mere suggestion, and it isn't the point, right? So, but you can see everything he's done in here is outline based. And then even this drawing is a line drawing in the sense that he doesn't mass. He doesn't blob, okay? That's what I think of as mass, is that stroke like with a brush. That's massing, that's mass drawing. But this is drawing from outline and then massing, as it were, through line drawing. So that's a more thorough thing called line drawing, more thorough going. Well, this one over here appears to actually have fused masses, some combination of line and mass when you get to here. And that's not unusual. But this, if you if you just took that outline and filled it in with one value, you would have a silhouette. So understand what I mean by silhouette. So when Degas says it's all silhouette, he was making pictures, and I would love to have shown you some. I probably should have, where you can see where the band players are all sitting, or the symphony, the orchestra is all sitting down there in the shadows with a black line around them, while the dancers they form the light area. So perhaps that's exactly what he was doing at that moment when he was pronouncing on the importance of the silhouette, or the fact that your eye picks up the silhouette as a primary phenomenon in all painting. There's a primariness to outline for sure. It's what we produce pattern out of and that sort of thing. So, but here's another use by this is Decap now, and these are two preliminary studies for pictures. So you can see that he's started doing an outline drawing here, and I think maybe he decided he didn't have enough. I don't know what he decided. At any rate, he turned an outline drawing of some sort. It's a very rough one. You can see the idea of it is really to just come up with a composition. That was what he was doing. And you see it in the blue cup drawing, which I think you should be able to find online. But he's turning it into mass. So it's an outline thing, and then he starts massing it. But he's really trying to see more completely his composition. So that's turning it into mass, but it's not mass drawing per se. He's doing the same thing here. The masses are more solidly massed, so they're actual, feel like blob units in some parts of this. You can see that the values. This is a values study. But that doesn't make it mass drawing per se. So I'll show you what I mean by it. And here's actually Pusan doing the same thing. He probably had a tracing going on here of his composition. The main lines of a composition must have been worked out in a thumbnail, which is, I think, of a cartoon-like drawing. And then he took an ink like the Chinese do and blobbed in, trying to search out the value scheme, right? So you can see he's actually painting this serious middle tone right through the whole thing, doing a lot of drawing with that. He's articulating the lights in that area, so they already must have been there with line. And then he's spotting the darks. So you can see no less than at least 3 values there, which is probably enough in any lay-in to help you to see what you've got. It's not necessarily so. In fact, you can see a difference between the general value down here and the value of the sky. So you might count 4 or 5 values, but in any case, you can see what he's doing. He's trying to sort out his composition. So he's adding mass to line, and the way he's adding the mass, there are significant places where it looks like he's doing what I'd call mass drawing, like when you look at the chest, this area down here, this face and chest, that whole blob there is articulated as a mass would be drawn like a mass with a brush. But the line's already sitting there, so he's using it as a basis, which you see in most watercolorists. Something similar is happening with Manet, but we're still talking about something that you can see is different from outline drawing the way Paxton was doing it, right? So these are all ways in which these are all things we look at it as being organized around spots. Manet gets much closer than the other guys about looking like he's really more interested in the spot. So this is outdoors in the light, and you can know the composition is going to be the dark spots. He puts the dark spots out there. He appears to be using some element of line and then quickly massing, and there's a certain amount of openness to the massing, sort of a linear marking. It's fairly typical. But again, you see this looks different, doesn't it? And so what is that? Is that his way in? Would he go from there into a finished work? And finish it from there? Or would he do something different? My guess is that most masked draftsmen will think more this way. And so this is much more like the way the Boston School mindset is, and mine in particular, that we are working with blobs and masses and articulating shapes like this as they relate to other shapes. And we're comparing the values of various masses at the same time. Those sorts of things. We're working a slightly different model. On the other hand, let's leave it at that for now. But you can see the orientation around spots, and that is more in keeping with the idea of mass drawing. But you can see a clear difference. Here's Anagony using what I would call looks like the Chinese wash again. There's this big wash. It looks like the sumi-eye. If these are all ink, they look like they're ink. And but you can see him doing this great masses. But in particular, when you see him doing this fence, there's no way in the world he was drawing that fence with outlines. He merely drew it. He got the value on his brush and drew the whole thing as a mass. And so, for example, somewhat with a stroke. Now, that doesn't mean he would have drawn this whole tree that way, but it does rather look like he did. It's got a different look from an outline drawn thing. And again, you can see this feeling decidedly, like in this area right here, this is mass drawing 101, right? This is it. You articulate with your brush full a silhouette, right? It's a mass activity going on here. It's always the mass into the line, which is what we do in the way I work. So it doesn't mean anything about what you can or can't do. It's just that the system is more mass oriented. That's what makes up, rather, what we think of as a painterly system. So up here, there's something that's going on that's different from either one, right? This is perhaps gesture drawing. He's done it with a fat charcoal or something, but he appears to be just sort of looking for some action of some people in a crowd, and he's got a sort of a sense of the drama. He's a bit of a dramatist when he does these things. There's a number. I couldn't find some of the ones that I like. Some of those that are in the one or more of the books, but that express more like this, but are human figures. But you can see this is mass drawing, right? You can see that major mass is articulated at their edge, and so on. I don't know what more to say about those, but you can understand there's a different use when you're just doing this for gestural purposes than if you're trying to actually find the spots out there. Or if we're trying to draw with the value that's there. So it's mass drawing in the sense that there's a mass of light meeting a mass of dark, and there's no preliminary drawing of outlines, or virtually none. So I think the Chinese are really the prime example of what I think of as mass drawing. And you could say this is me being a purist, but if you want it side by side with Holbein, maybe I should give you that. There we go. You can see what it ain't, can't you? Now, I could have shown you that drawing side by side with all those other ones, the Manet. You should be able to understand quickly the difference. The mass painter is into values right away, and he's drawing with the values. Okay, so these guys, they're drawing with the lighter values here, they're drawing with the darker ones here, and the even lighter ones here. And you can see there's no outline making per se. It's done with a more or less a stroke. It doesn't mean they may have not have taken precautions like made these too light to start with and then put the darker version over it when they saw the shape they wanted was working. I've read things that suggest differently, but probably like typical of painters, people are all over the place doing whatever worked for them. The importance of the use of memory when you're doing mass painting, the importance of it is that if you're doing this whole leaf, well, you'll hear the discussions. Read Bowie's book on it that covers some of this stuff. But you'll find that it's very important to have learned what these things do. A lot of times these guys would do like Da Vinci. They would have memorized the leaf type and then just do a variation on it from leaf to leaf. But that's not drawing from life when you do that. And these guys aren't necessarily drawing from life. So don't mistake that. When you get to Sargent, or when you get to this person, my guess is they're either drawing from a photograph or from life. And but this is a modern person. I didn't see the name. I couldn't see the name on the, and didn't dig deeper to find it. But this is what I think of as mass drawing, also, right? So you can see it's a major mass being articulated, and then of course that what you have to draw with is still contour. You could say it's outline. It's just that it's not an outline. Okay, outline and contour in the sense of when you get to the drawing part are synonymous. So silhouette. But those are all synonyms, right? They all mean the same thing. But the variation is what I said at the very beginning, that the outline, the tracing is called an outline. The tracing of the human contour, whereas the shape of the form, the shape, is called the contour, and you're articulating the contour with the outline. And when you mass it, you get a silhouette. So keep all those things floating in your brain. They have a slight use. It's a useful thing to know which one you're actually doing at a given moment. But they also can be and are frequently used, and I probably did use them as if they were the same thing in my last conversation. So here you can see that Hokusai would have probably painted this whole, or pretty much this whole thing with these light marks, and then he would have come around with the ink, darker bits of ink, and articulated the shapes of the darks, et cetera, right? So this would be mass drawing. There's no outline making here. That's really my point. I'm trying to just say that to you. But so if this is shocking to you, it shouldn't be. I mean, this is just that whole thing about, do we draw outlines and noodle them, or are we actually working in a different way? So let's see, was there something I should have said about this? I guess not. So here we are with Sargent, the watercolorist, and you can see all the marks in here suggest huge amounts of articulation with a mass, right? Articulation, drawing. What is drawing, right? So the first part of drawing, if you could argue, is the articulation of a contour, right? But the size of a particular mass, all those things are being made sometimes, like in the case of this one, with what might be a single stroke. Don't assume that it is. It's probably not, but it might be. And certain places, actually, you can see it's not. There's several, 1, 2, maybe 3 strokes in that little section right down there, or 4, whatever. And they are isolated, clean marks, right? That's a beautiful example of mass drawing. And this here, as a whole, is a beautiful place where it makes sense to do it. Much more than drawing the outlines of everything out there, especially when there's so much lost and foundness, so much lostness, I should say. And you can see probably that's why it might have something to do with why the Japanese actually do that as well. They find the idea that you can put down the reading edge of the ink blot and then just have it feather away. Those kinds of things give what you might call a life quality to some of this, to some of these drawings. Whereas the outline tends to lock you a little bit. There's a certain, if you want to call it that, a certain paralysis. So yeah, but in both cases, you're seeing drawing by the mass. Sargent, no question, Sargent did a lot of drawing with line before some of these. He doesn't appear to have been, well, if you're talking about the alligators ones, he appears to have been fairly careful to articulate, the curve of the back of the alligator with the jaggedy line on it, but he's doing it with a quite thin, very light line. And he doesn't care if it goes away or not, but he's using it as a basis to just draw with his masses. So at that point, you're using outline as a placeholder. And that's one of the ways I talk about us using it as well. Sometimes when I'm doing charcoal drawing, I typically do that. I throw out a line as a placeholder, a few lines, and then I'm looking for the mass. As you can see in the description of the flayed figure, the Hudon man that I show in one of the videos, I'm sorry to say my memory isn't such that I can remember the numbers of these videos. Now I'm showing you oil painting as mass drawing, okay? This is what outline into noodling based Velasquez turned into. So you can see this wouldn't have been a later development. This would have been the lay-in of fingers. This is a seamstress, I think that's what this is called. There's some doubt. Some people have doubt that this is actually one of Velasquez, but it is so ridiculously like this in its markings that if it isn't, it would surprise me. It's always possible for a person to suggestively draw based on this way of marking. But you can see this whole thing is oriented around masses, right? The spot. That's what we call the spot, the mass. So what does he articulate first, second, and third is definitely not the outline of the hand. You see that? So he's using certain things, and this is the way we think, certain things that silhouette down here, is a word, or create. See, I say silhouette meaning a light, meaning a dark, making a shape, usually with a sharp edge. And we're making our total shape out of this, into this, into this, into whatever, okay? So you can see that the shape-making process is not the outline in a line sense, but it's still not far removed because you actually have to have silhouettes that read to forming boundaries of any shape you work on. And by the way, even a light like this, you're not saying this is a silhouette in one sense over here at all, but it is a boundary of a light mass, right? Let's not go into that further. That's something you'll also find in more videos. But when you get to the Boston School, and I'm talking about now notably Decap and Tarbell in this instance, you can plainly see that there is no use of outline of an object per se. I'd refer you to this Ang and look at the outline of the hand where you can't even theoretically see it. It's just almost useless to have it from the point of view of visual impression. But he's still got an outline down here in the middle of this shadow. He's got the outline of the arm, and that's typical of these guys. I would be surprised. Here's Bugro doing it. You can see he's doing the same thing. There's no sense of losing. You don't lose anything that's real, and I suggest to you that's one of the realism models instead of the visual model. The visual model says don't put in things until their time comes. I say that's the visual model. That's my model. That's the visual order model. Okay. Don't make more of that. Don't impose that on other painters unless you see that it's true. But I don't think I made up anything. So I found that something like that as one of the efficiencies, right? So articulate well the shadow line here. What happens to make this side of that dark shape? Articulate well this with this as a precursor. Whereas these guys they literally would have traced the hand down there, and they would have been loath to lose it. Why would they lose something? Now I've done it both ways. I know you won't lose a line like that if you've already got it. You won't be wanting to wash it away. But these guys, our guys, never work from that point of view. They never put those lines in the first place until they are needed, right? So you may find at some point there's a need for a certain marking of it's a reflected light. In other places you'll find no need for anything. And significantly, in all passages there'll be lost areas because there's no significant outline of an object needed. So it doesn't mean outline isn't needed. And this is that outline that we call the intermittent outline, okay? So you'll see an outline here, a decisive outline. You'll see it picking up again here or here. And in different places down here, you see on the mouth, there's an outline piece here, but more or less nothing, piece of the chin. But you're finding intermittent outlines, but they're not lines. They're contour, they are edges of where values meet. So in that sense, they're silhouettes, okay? So here's a blob, and there's the silhouetting side. This side tends to just disappear, lose itself into that, forming up. You'd rather let the form ooze right out. So there's the silhouetting edge, the intermittent silhouetting edge, which I'm suggesting to you really sums up the visual, helps you to sum up the visual order in your impressionist articulation. So you can see the projectiveness of this finger and what it does for you. This is less projective because it's less contrasty, even though it's sharp, and this one's even less so, and less sharp too, or et cetera, et cetera. That's how the game goes. So here we're looking at Decap, and you're seeing the same exact model. If we go back for a second to look at this, does this not look like the lesson? And I suggest to you, by the way, Gamble notwithstanding, and by the way, in key ways, I don't think Gamel's even slightly wrong. Velázquez is perhaps still the greatest impressionist, but it depends on how you take that word, because I think the unity of the Boston School painters and a more sophisticated, I think at this point, articulation suggested that especially Decap might be the greater evolution of what Velázquez was doing. But that's me being what you may as well call prejudiced or whatever, or anyway, after long looks. But you can easily see that he's blobbing on a formy blob, and he's articulating a spot here and a spot there, you know what I mean? Just in the visual order. That actually is what we work with, would you believe? We don't put fingers down there and then apply tricky stuff like make a little lostness here and daub an edge there and accent another one. That's not the game. Doesn't mean that you're in the middle of this thing and you realize you didn't get enough edge and you have to pull a greater contrast to get that edge to play right to the other edges. But this edge and contrast here is sharper than other ones in the neighborhood. This one, because that's what's visually happening. See this one up here. This is the way the game is played. We put it down that way. This is what makes different methods, right? But you can see this is mass. This is mass oriented, coming from the mass, put down in drawing as a mass, and then the adjustments are, for example, when you want to cut that thumb, you're using the mass to do it. You got your brush full, and you come over here and articulate a silhouette, and then you take your brush away, right? So you're drawing by the mass, okay? But you can see the look of it is different, and that's fundamentally what I wanted to show you, Seaford. So I hope that was fun. I think I'll just stop right, just cold. I can't think of anything else I should add, but I will do another video on the idea of how line is used. by those guys who apply, like Degas frequently does, line and mass, and line and lostness, but leaving lines. When I see a Bouguereau and you can see the lines in it, I don't think there's an artistic intention there. But sometimes with Degas, you wonder, and that's because he was so complete as an abstract thinker. But when I see it in Bouguereau, I mean, when I see the one in Paxton, which I will talk about, when I see the line there, I say he couldn't figure out how to do that without that line. But because the whole rest of the painting looks visual, and then there's a line around a finger that looks like a pencil line. That's really weird. Okay. But you see, a pencil line is not a mass. Now, you could theoretically have a mass so thin that it looked like a pencil line. And I'm giving him that much credit. But when you look at it, it doesn't feel visual. But you've been playing this game a while, you realize why I say that. All right. Good. Thank you very much, C, for that point. And all well taken. And I hope that if you needed that clarification, I know that you probably already knew these things, and I know that for most of you, if you think about this just for a few minutes, or even go to your dictionary and read definitions, you can sort this out. As what Gamble would say, sort of think it through. So if you're young in this world, learn to think things through. And if you're older and didn't, do that too. But anyway, so that's my read on what mass drawing is, how that difference, how it looks different, and how it's there because of a whole different methodology, a series of steps that make up a methodology. Okay, that went way longer than I thought it would. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you all for all your donations. Thank you for your shares, likes, comments, all very good, and I'm hoping it's helpful. And hope you have a great work week, painting away, and we'll see you in the next one.